December 2019. Stereotypes kind of fascinate me a little bit. I've always just been interested in how entire groups of people all together with hive-minded groups, and hey, we all are a part of it after all. I really do believe that when you are near a person or animal, you are psychic. All I have to do is just think about going for a walk. Like, I don't mean lightly ponder the idea of going for a walk. I mean, when I'm certain it's what I'm gonna do, guess what? The dog comes over. I could be in another room, and I just hear him coming over because I'm certain I'm gonna go for a walk. Or how many times have you been in a group of people and you just think about something and you say it, and then next thing you know, everybody else is like, oh, I had that thought too. Or somebody says something that you were thinking. When you're around people, or even animals, you will share thoughts. It's like their brainwaves come out and you decode them. How many times have you called something and it turns out the other person, this could even happen on the internet, like a person gets a new pet and go, what shall I call my new pet? And then you come up with some ridiculous name, but it turns out that the other person on the internet was thinking the same thing. We are psychic, and there is no escaping the hive mind. It's not inherently a bad thing, it's just a part of what makes us us. And so on that note, the idea of stereotypes really interests me because stereotypes are just caricatures and they can get very, very specific. Now, I haven't really looked into modern day stereotypes like Slavs wearing tracksuits, for instance. That's a new one that wasn't around in the past. But sometimes I wonder, like, okay, these stereotypes are very, very specific. Where did they come from? They're not broad in general, they're very particular. And some of them are outdated and are from a bygone era. But that's another interesting thing. The way we culturally, as a group, retain memories of the past. That's just so interesting to me. So, some groups are too broad and varied to have a stereotype about them, so then you get these little niche stereotypes. Now, talking about them can be very tricky because it can make a lot of people angry. I'm sure you could think of some examples of stereotypes that if you were to attempt to discuss them, you would probably get a lot of flack for them, so you have to be careful. Especially when you really don't want to be inflammatory or anything like that, because some things that if you actually just bring them up at all, either to denounce them or encourage them, or whatever, you might get deplatformed for bringing it up and having the idea in people's minds, but that's only if you get caught. So, America has had a lot of stereotypes applied to it, as have other countries and nations and subgroups within them. America has several different ethnic groups and a lot of stereotypes of these particular groups by their ethnic background and regional local things. Think of Italian American stereotypes or what is called African American stereotypes, but actually the real African Americans are people that recently immigrated from particular countries. American history is a lie. We have red Native Americans that are called African Americans, but they're not from Africa. So, I mean, any African American could say, oh, my family's from Kenya, my family's from Zimbabwe, or something very particular like that. And they'd be like second or third generation. And anyway, so then, yeah, it gets complicated when you get these misnomers and this false lore into things. I don't know. Anyway, the stereotypes I'm mostly examining are the Red Lodge and Blue Lodge and interest group stereotypes, where people are defined not necessarily by ethnicity, but by whatever subculture they've gotten into. And subcultures are strange because they're really all about fashion and music and things like that, just really shallow stuff like what do you wear, what do you watch, what do you listen to. Those define a subculture. Like think punk, goth, emo, scenester, surfer, valley, it's just fashion. And a lot of groups are stereotyped by the jobs they do. Think of Indian stereotypes, as in from India, not Native American, where they are associated with tech support and phone scams. And here's just another thing that I've kind of been thinking about, but I don't have a whole lot to say at this time because I've just been thinking about it, but I have nothing conclusive. America has long been culturally perceived by other cultures as extremely rich, affluent, well-connected, and decadent. The stereotype of the fat, rich American that eats McDonald's and drinks soda all the time, and they have guns and cowboy hats and they're really rich, but what do they do for a living? What is their job? You don't really see job stereotypes applied to Americans, probably because we are such a large and diverse group of people. We just have our nationality that defines us, but every section of America is different. Some areas have richer people and other areas have an incredibly high cost of living and very little importing and exporting going on. And it gets even more convoluted when some areas that export a raw material don't refine that material in their own state, and they have to pay crazy high amounts of money to get back the refined version of their export. And some areas have a very, very low cost of living, and that gives people so much disposable income that other areas do not have. There's all of these factors to keep in mind. Just not having to pay $300 a month for the electric bill can make the biggest difference in the world. Anyway, so that stereotype of Americans being rich and decadent and even degenerate, but there's a stereotype that Americans are largely Red Lodge that's very outdated because, well, it's hard for me to say, actually, because the media and all publications are run by Blue Lodgers, except for extremely local media. The really local small town stuff, that seems to be Red Lodge, and Red Lodge is all about pretending everything is fine and acting like nothing is going on. And the Blue Lodge is all about pushing for enormous social changes in a short amount of time. And then there's that bias, like any media from or of the 1960s will make an enormous deal about hippies, like hippies were the most common and prominent thing of the 1960s, when what I was told by people was that hippies were just this small, weird group that largely kept to themselves and were ignored by everybody else. So in reality, hippies were not a big deal, but the media wants you to think that hippies are the biggest deal in the world. And so the idea that America and Americans are wealthy, that is extremely not true. It's only true for some sections. And the stereotype of Indians largely being poor. Now, during tourist seasons in the more touristy sections of America that I've visited, I did see tons and tons of Indians, and all of them are rich because they're able to go on a vacation. The poor ones had to stay home and, I don't know, melt lead in their cookware, or that's what I was told. And that kind of makes me wonder. Now, Indians are often perceived as being poor, and Americans are often perceived as being rich. China, I'm not sure what to think of China. The Chinese people I've met didn't talk about their home country. And not only that, but it'd be the rich people that can move out, because poor people are not so able to go wherever they want. I'm not really sure what to think of that mass third world immigration. I think something very strange is going on, and I think that it outwardly looks like poor people are flooding stereotypically rich countries, but that might not be what's going on. I think something very strange is happening, but I don't know what it is. And, well, what does America export? So many things are outsourced to China and India. That's why I'm bringing up these countries. These countries are perceived generally as being poor, but are associated with technology. Technology is not inexpensive. It's extremely costly and very secretive. Nobody knows how to make an 8-function calculator. Nobody knows how to make a pocket calculator. How does a famiclone work? There's still parts of the world where famiclones are a profitable business, and people make money off of making D-makes or bootleg 8-bit games. There's a market for that. And so the fact that even today Dendies are a thing, it just makes you wonder. Anyway, nobody even knows how a famiclone works. They just know how to make them, but they don't know how to make them from scratch. They don't know how to make them from the bottom up. I don't think anyone knows how to make an Atari 2600 clone. They just know how to duplicate it. Anyway, that's really a different thing. I'm trying to piece together something about the rich and the poor, because Americans are perceived as being wealthy, but poor people tend to get ignored and not reported on. by the media. The media only reports what it wants to report, and it'll make things up that didn't happen. So you can't trust the media. Oh, and the smear campaigns against other countries are going to tell you that Africans are starving, filthy, violent savages when the Africans you meet in real life are going to be pretty much the same as anybody else. They're not starving, they're not violent, they don't have 8 kids, they have like between 1 and 3 of them, and they're not filthy, dirty savages. Like, they'll tell you that, and they'll say, like, we're not starving over there. Our food is great, your food sucks. They're going to say that. Or the UAE. We're told that they're just a bunch of camel-humping terrorists that blow everything up and throw people off buildings and rape women. If you actually manage to look at the Arabic internet, you're just going to see that they're the same as anybody else, but they have a squiggle language. But they're not oppressive, and they're not psychotic or evil or sexist or rapey or murderous. They're just normal. And so, yeah, you can't trust the media. It's fake. 1984 crap. And the smear campaigns to try to make the Americans, speaking from an American perspective, feel better because we don't live in the UAE or China or Africa, and they show us these fake images of atrocities that actually aren't real. Anyway, man, I don't even know how to get back on topic.